I wish you all could see our cat Panda's face right now. He has ears turned sideways. He's very confused about what's going on. All he wants is to be pet, and he may just decide to participate in what is episode 4 of the Nem House podcast. There he goes. Hi, Panda. So Rach,
Yes.
I always forget to introduce us at the beginning of these. I assume that people already know us, but there'll be people hopefully eventually that tune into this that don't know us or hear this as their first episode. And Panda, come on. Come on. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You are?
I'm Rachel Nemhauser.
This is our 4th episode of the Nemhouse podcast, and it's been really fun to see people engaging with it, getting feedback on it, people asking for different topics, potentially future guests that we'll have, all sorts of fun stuff. And at the patreon.com/nemhouse site, we're getting folks signing up as free members. I think we've got 15, 20 people at this point, something like that. And as that grows, there'll be more community and hopefully more people that can interact and so all that's good stuff. It's very early days, but good stuff. Where we left off in episode 3 was we talked about kind of this process of acceptance that we had gone through, realizing that Nate was not going to, quote, catch up to his peers.
Right.
And he was going to have a disability likely for the long term. And there's a lot of things that kind of happen from there. And then some of them more detailed, some of them blurry. But it feels like one of the next places to talk about is the path from that very early age and understanding into when he needed to start entering the school system.
Right.
And a bunch of decisions that we had to make along the way and some twists and turns that happened and some things that we learned. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that's a great direction to go because I can say from the work that I do that parents, that the number one most common call we get are parents with questions about special ed and about how school works when you have a child with a disability. I think it's a great topic.
Let's start there, actually, since you have all this wealth of experience answering these questions. What are some of the common questions that you get asked by parents in this situation?
Well, I get parents. I mean, my favorite is when I have parents who are not American born and they didn't go to school in our school system. And so they don't even know what kindergarten is, what it looks like, or what preschool is, let alone how special ed works. So so there's families who just want to understand how it all works and what it looks like. There are families who have their sons or daughters have really complex learning needs. And I mean, I could geek out talking about special ed law, but the one thing anyone who's listening to this needs to know is that in the United States, starting in the 70s, children with disabilities a law was passed federally that children with disabilities are entitled to school and entitled to learn. So the way that looks now is that every child is entitled to an education. For those of us who have kids with really complex needs, that's not always easy to do. So a lot of times parents are calling for help trying to figure out how do we support this child so he or she could be educated, but they have a right to be educated. And then we get some calls from parents whose children are really struggling at school and things aren't going well.
Yeah. As a little bit of foreshadowing, or in other words, foreshadowing, is the way you say that word. We had experience with special education. We had experience with general education. And we got more experience with special education. So we'll tell you kind of how we walked both of those paths and some of the things that happened. Not all of them positive, but a lot of them actually pretty positive.
Yeah.
But let's start for a second with, you know, people I think don't necessarily understand from the outside. We certainly didn't at the time that, okay, your kid has a disability. Great. You've accepted it. Great. Um, now what? Your kid, in our case, had a communication challenge. He didn't necessarily understand what we were saying that well, and he didn't say a word, right? At this
Mm-hmm.
point, he still had not said a word.
Right.
And trying to figure out how to teach that child well before school what are social norms, right from wrong, safe from unsafe. You don't have any tools for that.
That's right.
That's my recollection of that time frame was like, oh shit, like this isn't working. Give me some examples of some like basic things that you tried to have Nate do that wouldn't be that hard in most situations, but was really hard for you with Nate.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I think about is this time I took Nate to the park and I was pushing him around in a stroller and he would not keep his shoes on and he kept kicking them off. And I thought, I'm going to use this opportunity. I'm going to like teach him that we keep our shoes on at the park. And the way I'm going to do that is every time he kicks them off, I'm going to put them back on. And my expectation was like 3 or 4 rounds of that. And he would sort of realize that kicking his shoes off isn't working and he needs to keep his shoes on. I also, of course, explained like it's too cold and whatever, but I did this technique that I think would have worked with my first son or that I expected would have worked. And it didn't work at all. Nate could do that 20 times. He is really, really stubborn in that regard. And I eventually gave up. That's the kind of thing I think about when you talk about that is like the strategies, the techniques, the skills that I thought or expected would work did not.
Well, and you were also in a bit of a survival mode, right? Isaac was in school at this point. You were dealing with Nate at home. I was working a ton. And between the two of us, I think I am more the disciplinarian of our family. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
No, I agree with that.
So I I'm not particularly good at it. It's something I'm always like amazed when I see really well behaved kids that like clear the table and do all the things. And I'm like, I mean, we just did not get that kind of we did not impart those kinds of skills for the most part for our kids. They're very nice kids, but I wouldn't say the most rigorous discipline in the household. And so the reason I'm kind of saying all that is whatever things were working with Isaac or I was able to get through with him, there just was nothing. I could raise my voice at Nate and he would just stare at me like blankly. So if you think about just these basic skills, which you can't teach, that are supposed to be the building blocks for other skills, the idea that he's then going to go into a school without us there and pick up skills was kind of like, yeah, right. At least for
I
me.
had a different perspective. I was like, yeah, I agree with you. We didn't have the skills, but my sincere hope or vision was that the professionals at the school would have the skills, like that they are special educators. That's what they get their masters in. I would hope that I was really hopeful that they would be able to teach us some things.
I didn't. You had more optimism than I did in that case. It's probably worth mentioning as well that this is a little bit prior to school, but we were trying to get Nate evaluated for certain things, and autism was one of them. And we saw a neurologist, and were told very clearly that he is not autistic. Do you remember that kind of sequence?
Yeah, I remember almost like I remember going to him with I had copied and pasted what the specific requirements are for an autism diagnosis so that I could make the case to him of all the ways Nate fit this diagnosis. And he told me, I remember him very specifically, he said, wait, the reason I was so strongly wanting the diagnosis is because it would have qualified Nate for a special program at school. And the doctor said, if I make that diagnosis, he'd be in a room full of kids who don't realize they're in a room full of kids.
Hmm.
First of all, insulting autistic people dramatically, because I know a lot of autistic people, and I would never describe them as by saying they're in a room full of people without realizing it. That's
Yeah.
so offensive.
Yeah.
But also, he was suggesting that Nate does know he's in a room full of people, and so therefore can't be autistic, and just ruled it out at that time. Nate was about 4.
What was that the same time where he said, maybe this is a different neurologist, I can't give him an autism diagnosis because he's got a sense of humor?
Yeah, probably the same guy.
I mean, I remember that really clearly, and we'll get to this eventually, but I don't think there's any problem with giving a heads up there. But it wasn't that the diagnosis necessarily changed, but that the DSM, for people that don't know, this is the great book of um, diagnoses that comes out for psychology, and there's DSM 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know what they're up to now, probably 7 or 8. I don't know, but there was a new version of DSM, and they redefined
Mm-hmm.
what it meant to be autistic, and all of a sudden Nate went from being on the outside to being on the
That's
inside.
right.
But technically, by the book, literally by the book, at that time, I'm not sure that anyone else would have um, diagnosed him as being autistic.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know very much about autism, and I think a lot of what I did know was wrong or ignorant.
Right.
But based on what I understood of autism at that time, it didn't seem like he was autistic. He wasn't flapping his hands,
Right.
and he made a lot of eye contact, and he was super connected to the people he loved.
So let's jump into from there. I just thought it was worth people knowing that we were already having some of these conversations and trying to figure out how to handle things, and also by not having that diagnosis, similar to what we talked about in the last episode, there wasn't a lot of clarity about, okay, if this, then do that. We were
Right.
kind of just feeling our way through,
Exactly.
and we couldn't really even hand that to teachers or caretakers to say, okay, this is what he has. Um, here's what to do, or that they would know what to do. So tell us, like, the kind of process to get Nate into his first school experience.
Sure. So, starting at about age 1, and we've already gone through this, Nate started receiving what they call early intervention services, therapies,
Mm-hmm.
some in the house, some in a center, some in a classroom setting, some one-on-one, but he was getting lots of services starting at age 1. Those services wind down at age 3, unless it's seen that your child needs more services. So at about age 2.5, they started reevaluating Nate and decided, you know what? Yeah, he's not caught up. No one was surprised by this.
Yeah.
As he approached age 3, it was determined he's not caught up. He's still developmentally delayed, and he's therefore eligible for what they call developmental preschool. That is a preschool that's embedded in the public school system, and it's preschool for children with developmental disabilities. It looks different in different school districts, but in ours, it looked like a half day, 4-day a week preschool program. There were maybe about 8 to 10 kids in the class, and maybe 2/3 of them had disabilities, and a third of them were neurotypical peers.
From your experience professionally, I'm going to switch you back and forth for a second.
Okay.
How influential is the school district that you're in, the state that you're in? You obviously know this state better, but like school district or county or whatever, to the type of opportunities or care that you can expect?
That's a that's a really good question. It's a hard question. I think like I said a little while ago, our kids are protected by some pretty robust federal laws when it comes to special ed. But every state, every district ends up interpreting those laws slightly differently.
Mm-hmm.
And every state and district um, shows how much they value their students with disabilities by how much money they invest in those students and how much some of the decisions they make and the programs they design. So while the federal law covers everybody, it does end up looking different district to district, building to building. There are some districts that do it better than others, in my opinion.
Is it as simple to say that if the school district does a good job with its public schools in general, like a general education, that it also is likely to do well with and fund well special education? Or do you find that there are districts where general education is funded really well and run really well, and they really um, don't support special ed?
I've seen both.
Okay.
I've seen districts where they're, I mean, I think the district we're in is a really good example where it's a well-funded district and
Mhm.
they act in ways that I think shows they value their students with disabilities. I've seen other districts that are well-funded that I think they make decisions that sometimes I'm like, ooh, that's not really valuing, that's not highlighting what I value.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to bring that up because I do think we are very fortunate, and it wasn't by accident, but I think we are fortunate that we lived in the school district we lived in, because I did get the feeling that education in general is valued here. Schools are relatively well funded. Staff is, obviously I would love all schools to get even more,
Yeah.
but I think we're on a good side of the spectrum in terms of the amount of funding and services and,
Yeah.
and
But
environment.
one of the calls I get a lot at my work is people saying, "Hi, I live in Michigan and I'm calling because I'm moving to the Seattle area. And can you tell me what's the best school district to live in if you have a child with a disability?" I get that question a lot. And my answer is like, I could tell you, the ones that have the better reputations, the ones that don't. But ultimately, it's so specific to the principal in the building, the classroom teacher, the para educator that's assigned to your child, what your child's specific learning style is, that it's almost like, yes, certain districts do it better than others, but also like certain classroom teachers in every district are the most amazing and they'll make your kids year.
Yeah, and that's special ed or general ed,
Yep.
right? So
Yeah.
okay, so Nate's in this developmental
Mhm.
preschool.
Yep.
What then?
Well, I want to tell you something really notable that came out of
Okay.
developmental preschool. Um is that I know I don't want to spend any time in this podcast talking about Nate and his bathroom toileting, anything that's private, and I don't want to get into it. But I will say that developmental preschool taught Nate to they potty trained him. He was a 3-year-old, and they did that. And to me, that's really notable because um, I remember them asking me, "Is he toilet trained?" And I, in my mind, was thinking, "No way! Like that is way out of our league. We're not even close to being there." And they were like, "All right, let's do that." And the amount of hope that they and like optimism they
Mm-hmm.
dropped on me just by suggesting or assuming that he could learn this really important life skill was I think a really nice turning point or a really nice thing to hear.
I'm so glad you brought that back up, because I distinctly remember thinking, yeah, good luck. Like, this is
Right.
never going to happen. And I remember feeling like, oh my God, he's never going to potty train. That's just going to be something that we're going to handle the rest of his life. So I don't want to violate the barrier you're putting up, the boundary you're putting up, but the recollection, and I think the thing for people in that moment is you're being told and bombarded so much with either doctors or other people telling you what's not going to happen and what's not possible. You're also seeing day to day all the things that are not happening and not possible. It is like this beacon when someone's like, "Oh no, we'll teach them how to do that," and you're like,
That's exactly my
"Wow."
point. And it really, I think that was a great entry into the public school system because it was what I wanted. It was somebody who had a little expertise here. And like Nate's school journey was hard, especially the early years, like balancing his like need to move around a lot and you know his difficulties with focusing. It was hard sometimes to get him to really sit still and learn something. But he did, and there was just a lot of professional expertise that was really welcomed at that time.
Nate's always been really social.
Yeah.
I have this recollection of him liking school even that early. Am I like, am I making that up in my mind? Did he have friends there? Did he like going to school? Did he fight it? Do you remember?
I think he loved going to school. I think he loved it.
That's
I
what I
don't think he
thought.
had any anxiety, any complaints. He was happy as can be. I was so nervous sending him to school because he still was working on learning to step up and down a curb safely. And I was like, how could you go to preschool by yourself when you're still like learning to walk safely?
Right.
Um, but he did it. They took care of him. They kept him safe. Um, the biggest challenges we had in those early years was that it was the bus ride sometimes got dicey. He was a little
Mm-hmm.
under supervised on the bus and
Mm-hmm.
things could go awry, but he made some friends, we made some play dates. It was actually like a really nice experience to finally be around other parents, to have him in a preschool class where there were other parents of kids with disabilities because we set up play dates and we got to know each other.
I I know I mentioned this on one of the earlier episodes that I'm not proud of how I talked about kids with disabilities back when I was in middle school and younger, and that the reason I bring that back up is that I had this fear of how is he, like, he is helpless. He can't tell us what's happened any day. um we don't really know. Anybody could mistreat him, either a teacher or, most likely what I was thinking about is like other students that are not in the special ed program could be teasing him. I was so fearful of what that was going to be like, partially because I was remembered how I used to be.
Mhm.
Do you remember having any of those types of concerns? Or I feel like you had a more optimistic view of this in general.
I actually, I no, I didn't have those fears, and I think partly it was because knew how much adult support he had. Like he pretty much had an adult standing by his side from age 3 till age 10. Um, so it felt like really unlikely that he was going to be bullied and picked on. Like I don't want to minimize that because for a lot of kids with disabilities, that is a really real experience for
Hmm.
them. But I was never worried about it because I felt like he always had an adult standing next to him.
All right. So he had a pretty positive start with the developmental
Hmm.
preschool. How long did that go for? And then what was next?
He was there for 2 years, like ages 3 to 4 and then 4 to 5. Um, and then it was time to start transitioning out of preschool and into kindergarten. At this point, I mean, I know how because I know how special ed works. I know how this should work, and I know what our experience was, and they weren't exactly aligned. Um, when Nate finished developmental preschool, it was decided that he would start kindergarten in what they call a self-contained program. Not in our neighborhood school, but in another school across town where there was a special program for kids with intellectual disabilities. Um, we were told pretty with a lot of certainty and direction that that was where he should be and that was the best place for him. And we were pretty uninformed at that point about what our rights were or what might be best for him. And we just went along with it. I said that now I know how things should work. I think Nate should have been offered the opportunity to be a general education student with every other kindergartner first, but that wasn't what our experience was. So he was sort of quickly directed towards this special program.
You, though, had a family member, if I recall, that, am I remembering this right, that had experience in this area and had experience in, I think the way it was used to be, I don't know if it's still called this, but mainstreaming.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. I did have a relative when I was growing up, like a kind of distant cousin who had disabilities, whose parents in New York State had done some pretty progressive advocating and for the time in the 80s, and she was mainstreamed all through school, and I had seen that with my own eyes.
and so you had got, I don't know if that's where you got the idea from, but you had decided, actually, I think we should, even after Nate started, even though we weren't given the choice
Mm-hmm.
initially, you decided, I think what's best for him is to put him in a general education class. Is that how you remember it?
No, this is what actually
Okay.
happened.
Okay.
Okay.
Involved dads, steps aside.
He was directed right into special education.
Right.
In the fall, he did his whole first year of kindergarten in that class.
Right.
Same year that he was in that kindergarten class, I took a year-long disability advocacy class. And as part and sort of got myself all fired
Bellevue
up.
School District never knew what was going to hit it.
That's exactly right. I spent a year learning about disability justice and about inclusion and the rights of people with disabilities and about how special education works. And about like halfway through that school year, I was like, oh, no, this will not do. This child needs to be out of that classroom and in a general education classroom.
Why?
Well, first of all, because that's what the law says. And I mean, you're going to get me on a soapbox. I don't want to like
Do it.
really go.
Just do it.
But he's entitled to the law says be educated in his least restrictive environment. The way that's interpreted is that a general education classroom is his least restrictive environment. Being in a self-contained classroom like he was in was more restrictive. That's one thing. Another thing is that is a strong belief that kids learn from their peers. They learn what appropriate behavior is by seeing appropriate behavior. They learn functional language by observing other students using functional language. They learn how to be a student and how to sit still and how to engage and socialize by watching other kids do those things. Being in a classroom that only has kids who struggle with those things and not having the exposure to peer models that are behaving in more appropriate ways is a loss, I think. So those are a couple of reasons.
I'm so glad that you took over because you have so much better recall on that and know so much more than me about it. But I do remember that I was not at all comfortable with the idea of him going into gen ed. It felt like a bridge too far. It was already uncomfortable for me just having him. I was just getting accustomed to him being in special ed. But two things. One, the notion of peer modeling was a big thing, and I agreed with you. But two, I think this is the most important thing for people is it became really clear to me that the reason the school district wasn't giving us these choices, or at least presenting us with these choices as much, was not because it was what was best for Nate, but because it's costly, complicated, and fraught with challenges for them to try to build an inclusive general education classroom. It's much easier for them to have two separately staffed, separately um, uh, separate curriculums,
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. When he was, halfway through that first year of kindergarten, and I started pushing and saying, next year, I want him in general education, and I want him in our neighborhood school where Isaac goes to school, where we have relationships and community. They the arguments against it that they made were many, by the way, but
Mm-hmm.
they had a lot of reasons it would never work. And one of them was, well, we put all of our expertise in this center, like all the most experienced, most knowledgeable special ed teachers are in this program. And if you're here, you're going to miss out on that knowledge and expertise. That was one of the things. There was also, there were
The retort to that, though, right, is that's their problem. Not to be as callous as that, but like they are required to make those things available, even if he is in a general education.
That's right.
So that's a them problem, not an us problem.
That's right. I mean, most of what they mentioned was a them problem. There was also the speech therapy classroom was really far away from the classroom where he was going to be in. And so they were like worried that it was going to take him too long to walk to speech therapy, while in the other building, the speech therapy classroom was closer. I mean, at some point you start to take it personally. Like, why don't you want my kid? Like, why are you putting up all these barriers?
Mm-hmm.
But here's how it played out. They did throw up a lot of barriers. They were sincerely and genuinely concerned that moving him to gen ed would not work. And we insisted. And I was, like I said, I was pretty fired up from this class I was taking. I insisted and I advocated, and they agreed to do it. And from that point on, although they had resisted, they never did anything but fully embrace him in general education. They never brought up again that he shouldn't be there. And for the next, he repeated kindergarten in general education. He did kindergarten through 5th grade, all in our neighborhood school in a general education classroom. And the entire school staff did everything they could to teach him and support him.
I cannot express enough how distant, how much space there was between what my worst fears were of what would happen with him in a general education classroom versus reality. You had so much convincing to do of the district.
Mm-hmm.
I'd argue I was a tougher customer in a lot of ways. There were some things that you had done and learned that I had gained confidence in because I felt a different way. We did them your way and it worked out, that I was like, okay, I'm gaining confidence in your instincts on this and your knowledge. But I was really worried about that. And
like worried about his safety,
his well-being, just overall. And that mainly was it. And then also, I mean, I'm a huge advocate, we both are, of the school districts, of the teachers, of like the people that are in the system that are trying to do this. I know how hard it is, how underpaid they are. Like I have so much sympathy. And so I don't like feeling like I'm making their jobs that much more difficult. I conceptually, intellectually understand why building a curriculum that will support Nate as well as, a relatively advanced student in the same, that's like, I don't know how to do that. So like,
right.
I recognized all those things, but primarily it was like the social thing and how he was going to be treated. Rach, that is like, it makes me so happy to reflect on that. I gained so much more respect for the next and hope for the next generation, seeing how these kids, because kids, no matter what you like say in a classroom, like kids are going to be kids. They're going to behave the way they're going to behave. Yeah. They treated him so well. Like they were so inclusive and they cheered for him and they wanted the best things to happen for him. I don't know that he really experienced almost anything that was hateful or teasing or anything like that. And it's to this day like something that just always puts a smile on my face
Mm.
and gives me hope for humanity. If I,
Yeah.
not to be too cheesy, but it really was amazing.
Yeah, he was part of that community. Like a community, in my opinion, is includes a really wide range of people. That's like any neighborhood, any community. And schools should be no different. And the fact that we try to like put all the gifted kids in one program and all the kids with intellectual disabilities in a different program, like, is a shame because we're missing out. We're like removing that wide range of being from the classroom. And I was so glad that he was there. I will say that like it got harder with every year.
It did.
Um,
I wouldn't say that. I don't want to invalidate what you're saying, but
okay.
my experience was it was really good, really good, really good, and then it got exponentially harder. And
Yeah,
like,
that's probably better. Like kindergarten, first, second grade were really good. And they were really good socially. They were
yes,
difficult, I think, behaviorally. But
yeah,
the school worked with us and we got him a lot of support and it really did get better with time. Um, but then by third, fourth, fifth grade, the social divisions really started to show. And the kids were still always nice to him. No one was ever mean to him, but just, fourth graders are more discerning on who they invite to their birthday parties than first graders. And the invitations stopped coming and the play dates
yeah,
stopped. And when I would visit in the classroom, I would notice him spending more and more time on the outskirts by himself and less time sort of surrounded by his classmates.
yeah, kind of like isolated in place to some extent.
Yeah.
Before we get into that part of it, I just as an example, I mean, I remember him doing like choir concerts,
Yeah.
right? Are some of our most cherished videos that we've got. And Nate up there, not able to do the singing, but he would bop around and dance. And we were sitting there attending these things like we weren't sure what he was going to do. He had all sorts of socially inappropriate behaviors. Like we didn't know if all the clothes were going to stay on. Like we didn't know what was going to happen, but he did great. And he made us laugh. And he like like his peers were like into it and they would help him if he started to do something wrong.
Hmm.
They'd redirect him. And
Yeah.
it was amazing.
Hmm.
It was so cool. And so, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate there were some really, really special
There was.
experiences.
And
And
I
you can't
think,
have that. Sorry, one last thing. You can't have that if you're not open and don't
right.
give it a chance to
Hmm.
happen. That's something I would have never, ever had for him if I was his only parent, because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have even thought or tried that. So I give you all the credit, and just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's also worth noting that so many of the reasons that we wanted that for him paid off. Like he did learn a lot about how to be a student, how to sit still in a classroom, how I think his communication started in those early years. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was like, I think second grade when he said, shut up. I'm sure he learned that from other second graders. Like, I mean, no one wants their kid to start saying that, but like, that's why
Oh, we
he
would
was
have
there.
taken
Yeah,
anything at
like he
that
was
time.
learning.
Yeah.
He was learning. He didn't learn to read, but he was learning so much being in that classroom for all those years. So it did get harder, but I think it was so good for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, so then let's kind of start to wrap by just talking about exiting um mainstream
Mhm.
gen ed classrooms, and you started to tell why we got there. If it was going so well, why didn't we just stick with it?
Yeah. This is a really tough one because, like I said, we moved him into general education because I came out of a class I had taken and I was passionate and I was fired up and I so strongly believed in his right to be there and that the whole world benefits from him being allowed to be in his regular classroom. And um so that was all there. But then also over time, it got harder. And I started to see a change in Nate that caught my attention. And Nate, who had always been gregarious and outgoing and loved a party and loved being the center of attention, started withdrawing. And I would come to the classroom and he'd be walking around the outside of the classroom, or he'd be standing in the back, or just sitting and observing and not participating. And that was my first reason why I started thinking maybe it's time for a different sort of placement as we approach middle school.
Yeah. I think there's started to be a much greater divergence between the typically developing kids and Nate at that point. The younger grades, his silliness and like love of making people laugh was such a great fit. And I also wanted to really reiterate that Nate being in those classes was not only good for him, I think it was great for the other students.
Yeah.
I think they're
Hmm.
better off for it. I think they experienced something that'll probably be with them for their whole lives. I think ultimately I think it was good for a lot of the teachers. Um, Shout out to is Allie, right? Was
Hmm.
the special ed.
Hmm. His special ed teacher.
I mean, just an amazing person.
Yeah.
And you talked about another episode, just how like someone seeing your kid for their
Hmm.
amazingness, and she was so good at that.
Hmm.
But I remember you get to like fifth grade, and there's kids learning more complex math and
Hmm.
English and all these things, and Nate doing a silly sound or silly dance, like it just became pretty out of place. And so I think that led to, and his learning was not going to keep up. And so he didn't know how to connect as well at that point with
Hmm.
them. They didn't know how to connect with him. And so it started to feel like a one kid special ed program
Hmm.
that was in gen ed only in name.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. Like, I so firmly believe in his right to be there.
Yeah.
But then I also looked at him and saw his joy and his confidence sort of diminishing. Um, in the best case scenario, he should be able to be accommodated in any school he chooses to go to. That that just doesn't always work in the way in the way it should. And when I really started to think about what it would feel like to be the only person in an entire school with a significant disability, the only person in an entire school learning to use technology to communicate, the only person who needs a one-on-one adult with them at all times, ha- and what that might do to his perception of himself and to
Mm-hmm.
his language development when we're talking about learning a new language, this technology. And like, ultimately, to me, it became like my principles matter, but like his sense of himself and his self-esteem is, to me, just mattered so much more.
Yeah. I know that you've taken some heat for that. Won't go into detail because I know it's a sensitive topic, but you know that there's this line between kind of zealotry and just parenting. And parenting is this constant evaluation of what is the dogma, what is the latest greatest information, research, expertise, advice you're getting from all these places, all these sources, and what do you think is best for your kid?
Mhm.
And some of that is listening to those things and following that advice. And sometimes it is, no, I know my kid and this isn't the best thing for him
Anymore. It
anymore.
was, and
Yeah.
now it's
And
not.
it doesn't have to be a statement. It's just I am going to be making real time in the moment decisions based on what we know of all these things to optimize for hopefully the best outcome. And I look back at that. I don't know about you, but I look back at that as I'm not sure that I would have changed anything
Mhm.
with that. And I'm pretty happy with the path, and we'll talk more about later years in another episode, but I think if we had kept him there, I'm not sure we'd be in as good of a spot as we are now.
Mhm.
Nothing against those people, and it's nothing against people that think that um, gen ed is the only way to go. But for in our case, I'm pretty confident that the path that we went is pretty close to optimal for him.
I think so. I mean, as a parent, you do the best you can do with the information you have at
Yeah.
the time you have it. And you just do what you think in your heart is the best thing for your kid. And um yeah. And
And
so after all those years of being really insistent, we made the decision as he approached middle school that it was time to move to the self-contained program.
well, I want to close just by saying for people that are listening, don't let people shame you for your decisions that are based off of what you think is best for your kid. I feel so strongly about this, and there are going to be people. Just because we've had this experience does not mean that I would tell somebody, "Oh my God, you're so wrong for doing this," or "You're so right for doing that." It is so hard to make these choices for any parent of any kid. As long as you're thoughtful and deliberate about how you're trying to do these things and doing your best, like, give yourself a break. And I just think there are people out there that will try to make you feel really small and really stupid and less than. And don't let them win. Know that there's others of us out there that are cheering you on.
Love that.
Yeah. All right, my dear. I think we should wrap on the 4th episode. Does that sound good to
That
you?
sounds great.
All right. I am Brian Nemhauser.
I'm Rachel Nemhauser.
This has been the 4th episode of the Nemhouse podcast. Take a look over at patreon.com/Nemhouse. Join as a free member. That is where all the podcasts are. You can join as a paid member as well. All our proceeds, if and when we have proceeds, will be donated to a charity that we decide on at a later date. It'd be great to have folks join and start to build the community there. Most importantly, tell other folks about it. Anyone that you think might be benefit from just hearing a friendly voice and another experience and knowing that they're not alone in this journey. Share this with them. Share the link. That's probably the biggest thing you could do to help us get the word out to other people. So until we come back for episode 5, have a great rest of your week.
Hi, everyone.